She's April.
And she's Molly.
And we are
the Book Besties.
If you can listen to DMX with your windows down, you can listen to Sissy Spacek read you Kill Mockingbird.
I wanted you to see what real courage is instead of getting the idea that courage is a man with a gun in his hand. It's when you know you're licked before you begin, but you begin anyway, and you see it through, no matter what.
Choose kind, because if not, I'm coming for your ass.
Damn everybody that thinks it's okay. I guess I want to ban those people.
As soon as you tell a kid they're not allowed to do something, what are they going to do?
I think you should just do what makes you happy, and hopefully you can make money at it. Hey!
How are you? I've missed your face so much. You've been gone for so long.
I really feel like I have been. We've been on vacation, and because I'm a teacher and it's summer and my husband's a stay-at-home dad, we took a very extended vacation, and so we were gone for like 10 days, which is amazing.
Forever. You were gone forever. I mean, you were still texting me, but I haven't seen your face physically.
I was going to say, Molly, we were still texting like every day that I was gone. Every day that I was gone.
It's not the same when I don't get to see your face.
Yeah. So we were on vacation. We went to Cocoa Beach, Florida.
I love that place.
Yeah, it was great. My in-laws are from, well, they aren't from there, but they live in the Tampa area, which is where my husband grew up for most of his life.
Yeah.
And my father-in-law actually grew up in Cocoa Beach, so he was really excited to show us, the things. And I learned some of my husband's family history that was really random, which I knew this story, but I have to tell you this story because it's the craziest story.
Okay.
My father-in-law was once babysat by John Glenn.
What?
The
John Glenn?
John Glenn. Yes.
So by proxy, he's an astronaut.
By proxy, sure. So his older sister was supposed to babysit him, and she couldn't because she was going on a group date. Because back then, you didn't
group dates,
go date alone, right?
Because
with
the
John
Glenn's.
Right, with John Glenn's daughter, and so then he didn't have a babysitter, so John Glenn came over and babysat him.
That's amazing.
And then I also learned that in the there's a humongous building at Kennedy Space Center. I mean, It's just massive, and it's the vertical, it's the place where they put the rockets together vertically, so they didn't have to set them on their side and then tip them up. Mm-hmm. And so it's one of the biggest buildings in the world just because of the sheer size of it. And the windows that are in there are fiberglass windows, and Tom's grandfather made those windows.
Nice.
Yeah. So just really random. Yeah. I was like, these are just such cool stories. And of course, my oldest son, who wants to be an astronaut, was just eating it up. So,
I'm sure. That's amazing.
Yeah. And the beach was beautiful. And look how tan I am.
You're glorious. As I am still starky white, even though I am in frickin' Texas. I
was wearing SPF 75
because we are.
How am I still tan? I know it's pathetic. Tom was like, "You're gonna have to change your lighting when this tan goes away." I was like, okay. Fine.
I mean, how many times has Tom told me I look like a ghost on camera? So
it's all right. You've got this witchy hair and background going on now.
I know,
so
isn't my fancy background nice?
I love it. I feel like you could work at Hogwarts, I finished another Harry Potter book, by the way.
Well, okay, we need to figure out if we're going to be doing all of them or just this one episode for them, fans. So you got to let us know, because if we're dragging it out, you need to tell her now.
Right now, we just have it scheduled that we are doing one episode to cover all 7 books because I want to be freaking done. But we'll listen to the fans if they want to hear more. I will bite the bullet because I have now finished 5 of them. I have a lot of feelings, guys. A lot of feelings.
Word. I mean, yeah, of course you have a lot of feelings. I mean, a lot of feelings. But you did admit that you see what we're talking about Lupin and Sirius being
I do. I saw what everyone was talking about with Lupin and Sirius being a couple. Yeah, I can see that. I was very sad that I'm sorry if I'm spoiling Harry Potter for anybody.
It's been out for a gazillion years. They'll get over it.
I was very sad when Sirius Black died. I actually had an emotional reaction to Harry Potter.
And she was mad at us for one, not telling her Sirius thing, and two, for the fact that she was crying over Harry Potter.
Yeah. Anyway, there's time to talk about Harry Potter later. We are going to talk about this book today, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee.
I have
which is my absolute. Oh yes, that's the
paperback.
The trade paperback edition. So this is my absolute favorite book of all time, forever and ever. The end. I love it. I love it. I love it. This is the copy I borrowed from the library. I have a different version that is my physical copy. Why didn't I read that copy? Because my book is in storage right now. But I have read this book as audiobook. I've read it as paperback. I've read it as a hardback. It just all the things. It is available as an ebook now. It wasn't for a very long time. It became available as an ebook, I think, in 2017.
Sissy Spacek does the audiobook, which was a good surprise for Molly.
Sissy Spacek does an amazing job as the narrator for the audiobook. So if you are an audiobook fan, or if you're wanting to get into audiobooks, it's definitely a really good one. I don't know that it's one I would start with if you've never read an audiobook. I would start with maybe Yes Please by Amy Poehler.
Oh, definitely. Also, not sponsored, but Audible. Listen to us. We're always promoting you, babe.
Yeah. I also plug local libraries. They have apps like Hoopla, and also we're not sponsored by Hoopla, but
or Libby. That's what my library uses is Libby, which is coming handy
Mine
for
uses
me.
both. Mine uses both, and I support local libraries. They are a dying art, and I'm sad that they're dying because it's my profession, but we are still relevant, so please use us. So, can I just tell you a little bit about, I know you know these things, Molly, but I'm going to tell everybody else what we're doing. So,
well, I read your notes, so that's how I know the things.
Well, you already know these things that I'm going to say, but August 31st is when this episode is going to post, our To Kill a Mockingbird episode, and it is going to kick off 5 weeks of banned books. So we are doing 5 banned books, and I'll be hosting all of them because every book I've ever loved is a banned book. And we're going to talk about why the book was banned, and we're going to talk a lot about banning books and the process, and I'm going to get really upset because I absolutely hate banning books. And as a librarian, I want to damn everybody that thinks it's okay. I guess I want to ban those people.
It bugs me too.
It's not cool. But we're starting with To Kill a Mockingbird. So I'm going to give you all a little summary of To Kill a Mockingbird, if you will. So I wrote out a summary, but I'm just going to talk about it. So this book is a coming-of-age novel. It was published in 1960, and it's set in the mid-30s. There's fantastic, the first chapter has fantastic references to what's actually happening in history at that time. So Scout Finch is the main character. She's the narrator. And one of the things that she says is, Macomb was recently told they had nothing to fear but fear itself, which is a great FDR quote to get you right in that time set. So Scout Finch, her name is actually Jean Louise. She is narrating this book as an adult, looking back on some things that happened when she was a child, particularly the case of Tom Robinson, who is a black man in a small town in Macomb, Alabama in the 1930s, who is accused of raping Mayella Ewell, who is a white woman who's 19. I almost said she was a little girl, but she's not. She's 19 and is accused of raping her. And Atticus Finch, Scout's daddy, he is the lawyer who has been assigned to Tom's case. He is the defense attorney. And this book goes and weaves together all these wonderful stories that happen within this small town and how it really affects them. The movie only focuses on Tom Robinson's case, but the book itself has a really rich depth and covers a lot of different characters' stories. The book appears quite frequently on best of lists. It won the top prize for PBS's Great American Read. It won number 1. But the book is frequently banned. It's frequently on the banned books list. It's one that is always top 10, like every year.
Which
every
makes
year
zero sense.
Right. I have a lot of feelings on that. So, the reason that it is usually challenged most frequently is for the use of the N-word, as it is frequently used in there. We're talking about the language of 1930s.
Which,
and if it
offends
you,
a common word back then, even though it was disgusting.
And if it offends you, that was the point. She wants you to be offended. So, yeah. Most recently, it has been challenged because it presents the idea of a white savior. We need the white man to save the black man. That's the reason it's been banned. It was actually challenged this year for that reason alone. But it's been challenged for that a few times. In spite of that, the book is published in 40 languages.
Damn.
It sells over 1 million copies worldwide every year. And it earned Harper Lee the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 1961 and the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2005. Harper Lee never published another book unless you count the quote-unquote sequel, which was Ghost at a Watchman, which came out in 2015, which is actually not a sequel. It's actually what the original To Kill a Mockingbird was supposed to be. But the publisher said, hey, this story about the kids in here, this is more interesting. Write about that. So when they published Ghost at a Watchman, it actually changed some things about Atticus. Not what we need to be talking about for this book, but it made me really angry.
I haven't read it.
Well, I've read it once, and despite the fact that I would literally read a grocery list and pay $1 million to have a copy of Harper Lee's signature, I will never read that book again. So, anyway, so that is basically what To Kill a Mockingbird is about. Atticus Finch is one of those characters who's the great literary hero, especially of American literature. Because I was an English major, essentially, we talk a lot about the difference between American literature and other literatures of the world. I took American literature in England, and we had this whole discussion of what makes something American with a capital A and what makes something literature with a capital L, and can American literature be both? And it was a whole thing, and it was very snooty British, but I loved it. Anyway, not relevant, but...
Nope, relevant because you said so.
Molly, you might have to rein me in on this episode. Okay, so that is the basics of To Kill a Mockingbird. And look, if you haven't read To Kill a Mockingbird, I really encourage you to read it.
How did you skip 11th grade? That's what I wanted to know.
I read it in 10th grade, and I taught it in 9th grade. So, you missed high school or something. But
congratulations. That's awesome. Tell us your story.
But I think reading it as an adult, it definitely has a different impact. So I encourage all of you to read To Kill a Mockingbird. It's an incredible book. And now I'm going to find out what Molly thinks about it. So, my first question, what did you think?
Okay, so I read it in high school, and then I reread it for this. Mm-hmm. I see why it is not just your favorite book, but it's also both of my stepsisters' favorite books. Jennifer and Beth, this is their all-time favorite go-to book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I see the validity. I understand why it is. It doesn't hit home like that for me. Yeah. I understand the book. I comprehend the book. I see why it is very relevant. It's very important, I think. I think she highlights things that isn't talked about that time frame, right? There's a lot going on in the 1930s, and racism was not one that was covered a bunch.
Right.
And so that makes this book very important in my eyes.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Is it a favorite of mine? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Am I going to make my kids read it for homeschooling? You bet your sweet bippy I am.
Well, you can tell them that Auntie April will talk to them about it when they read it.
Well, I have teacher April questions later anyways, but I digress because that is personal Molly problems, not Book Bestie Molly problems. It has a cultural relevance. And when you were talking about this white savior thing, now I am speaking from my personal opinion. This is my personal opinion. I don't see Atticus as a white savior role. First and foremost, the judge went to him, right? Mm-hmm. Atticus never asked to be a white savior. Right. He didn't go, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to save the black man today. That's not what happened. Right. I can understand where it can feel like that.
Right. But I mean, he did, they talk about the fact that it wasn't a problem that he was assigned the case. It was the problem was that he was actually going to defend him.
Right. But I mean, Atticus didn't think this out. He wasn't purposely trying, but I digress. You weren't asking that question.
Yeah, but he does tell his kids that even if he weren't assigned it, he probably would have taken it. Because the thing is that he was going to actually defend Tom Robinson, whereas another attorney
would have just ignored him for sure.
Right. I don't get the white savior issue with this book either. I mean, I can see a little bit of it, but to me, we're talking about a book that was set in the 1930s, but written in the 1960s.
Right.
And what she's doing, she wrote this during the Civil Rights Movement. And what she's doing is showing you this has not changed.
Right.
Systemic racism is real.
And it's still real now when we're in 2021.
And it's still real now. And that is why I get so angry when people ban this book, when people challenge this book. I don't want my child to read this because it says the N-word.
Are you offended?
You are supposed to be offended. That is the point. She wants you to read this book and say, you know what? This isn't okay. Maybe we should change this.
Because honestly,
we haven't.
Okay, this should be part of critical race theory. Let's not lie. Mm-hmm. And banning of this book is, banning critical race theory, which I have a huge problem with. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, I get people saying history is history, but obviously we haven't learned from it. And this book is showing that she wrote a book about the 30s in the 60s, showing we have not changed.
Right. I mean, I'm not going to completely refute what you're saying about critical race theory, but I don't really think it's the school's place to teach that. Like, you need to get your house in order.
Right. Well, okay.
And teach your kids to,
without starting a massive argument. Mm-hmm. There are children in homes that are taught racism, right? Racism.
But you're not going to change that by teaching it in the classroom. You're not going to change that by teaching it in the classroom.
Giving them an open door to ask questions.
Yes, and we do that as educators anyway. Right. You don't have to adapt critical race theory, right, quote unquote.
But giving it a name, labeling it, is, yes, that's what it is, but labeling it is what's making people angry, right? We've been teaching it all along. Books like this, books like The All-American Boys, like...
Yeah, that's why when it comes up, I'm usually just like, you can say we're not adopting critical race theory, but if you're a good teacher, especially a good teacher in a culturally diverse school, which I am, and I have always taught in culturally diverse schools, you are doing that in your classroom anyway. You're making a space for kids to safely question and say the things they need to say. I know this is off topic, but this is, again, we talk about this on this pod before, how we are not on the same side politically.
No.
But we have those
similar beliefs, obviously, or we wouldn't be sitting here agreeing on it.
I just think that it shouldn't be the curriculum. Like, I don't
I'm not saying it needs to be a part of the curriculum, but
that's what they're doing.
Right. But cutting it out completely, cutting out the ability to have that conversation is ridiculous. And that is happening here in Texas. Is them saying you can't talk about the race riots, Selma, any of this kind of thing.
Right.
And
when I was there, I'm sorry to interrupt it, but when I was teaching there, they were adopting a new history curriculum and they were leaving out entirely the civil rights movement. This was ridiculous. Right. That was the curriculum they adopted in 2010. They decided to leave that out, which is absolutely ridiculous. Can I ask
which school district it was? Was it Pasadena?
No. This was the statewide curriculum.
Oh, I was like, was it Pasadena?
No, it was the Texas Department of Ed.
TEA, man.
And the problem with all of that was because the way that textbooks get published, it's really Texas and California have a big pool on what's in all the textbooks nationwide because they buy so many of them, and that's just how it works out. So there were a lot of districts that were like, if that's
I want to clarify on my end, I'm not hating on the teachers. Y'all are doing everything you guys can. We are frustrated with the system. The system is broken.
Right.
And y'all deserve better. Period.
Yeah, they're dealing with critical race theory right now. Our school board is deciding what they're going to adopt and what they're not going to. And they are saying we're not adopting critical race theory. And a lot of parents are up in arms because of the things that they're doing. They're saying, well, this is critical race theory. And what I keep trying to say is, these are things that naturally happen in the classroom. It's not us sitting there saying, like,
all right, we're going to talk about what happened in the South. Okay.
Yeah, it's not that.
We definitely went off a rail. Sorry.
We did. Guys. I'm sorry. And now we're 20 minutes into the episode and we're off the rails. And I haven't even started my questions.
We love you guys. And and tell us in the comments. What are you thinking? Without getting hypercritical, we will block your stupid ass if you're freaking saying the N-word or doing anything crazy. But tell us how you feel. If you're a teacher, tell us what it's like right now. Because we'd love to hear from you.
And be kind because, like, choose kind. That's how I feel about that.
Because if not, I'm coming for your ass.
And mostly Molly will come for your ass and I'll just go block. All done.
Because she'll let me argue with you for 20 minutes before she deletes you. Okay, moving on. Back to Kill a Mockingbird.
So, this book, Kill a Mockingbird, is filled with several different plots that are woven together.
Correct.
Was there one story in the novel you connected with more than the others? Or even a character that you really connected with?
Boo Radley.
I love Boo.
So,
why? Why him?
Okay, so growing up, we lived in a small area. There's several towns. Nichols, Tioga Center, Barton, Waverly, Sarah. It's just this big area. In the Waverly, Sarah area where my aunt lived, there was a man who is special needs, who'd ride his bike everywhere. He had a vest. And there was always, when it came to school-age kids, there was always stories of how scary he was, what he did. Like Boo, there was like, oh, he's this, right? Right. And I knew him, right? I knew him from my Aunt Pam because my Aunt Pam owned a nail salon. She'd help him. She'd give him breakfast in the morning. Like, this was a thing. And I saw him, right? I saw... Then I was a child and I recognized the innocence in this man.
Right.
And understanding Boo's storyline and understanding this was just a small little section of town.
Right.
Like, and I watched it on a big scale where everybody knew this man's name and everybody talked about him and everybody had like a rumor. And I couldn't imagine being that person. And showing the full spectrum of Boo's life and what happened and who he was and how he ended up being so important to the storyline, I just, it warms my heart, you know, and...
Yeah, I mean, there's this great quote from Atticus, which they're it's actually not about Boo, but it is about Boo because symbolism from the English teacher here.
And if you're listening from back home, that gentleman who's in his late 60s now, his bike was stolen a couple weeks ago.
What?
If you stole his bike, there are so many of us that will hunt you down and hurt you. Please just give him back his bike.
Yeah, that's
awful. It was awful. I cried. I saw the social media post and I cried because I was nowhere near home to be able to go help him. Anyways, continuing.
So there's a quote. This is in the last page of the book. It's about a book that Atticus is reading to Scout, and they think that this guy did all these bad things, and she says, and Atticus, when they finally saw him, why, he hadn't done any of those things. Atticus, he was real nice. His hands, this is Atticus, his hands were under my chin, pulling up the cover, tucking me in. and this is Atticus's quote, most people are scout when you finally see them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the whole point of the book. Like, when you really stop to look at someone, I mean, they use when you walk in someone's shoes, but they actually say when you climb into someone's skin and walk around in it, that's how you know them. And that is specifically talking about, like, you need to experience something from the other side. Mm-hmm. So we talk a lot about, with this book, we talk a lot about, can we understand Tom Robinson's plight? And we're going to talk more about this when we get to All American Boys, because we have this perspective of a black male teen and a white male teen, the same incident. And I mean, I just think Boo Radley is this iconic character. He doesn't even come out to be actually seen in the novel until the last chapter.
Right.
Oh, and what does he do? He saves their lives.
Robert Redford played him.
I know. Have you seen the movie?
Yes. Okay. So I saw the movie when I was a kid in high school, and then I rewatched it after reading the book because I was like, I'm remembering reading snippets from the book, and I'm remembering snippets from the movie. So I did both, right? To just kind of like. And I was like, holy crap. And then I looked up the IMDb.
And it's super young.
He was
Robert
30.
Redford,
I looked it up. I did the math because I had to look it up. He was 30 when he did that. So.
And the movie is all set in black and white, even though it was made in the 60s.
Because it was
Gregory Peck. Right. Yeah. Gregory Peck plays Atticus Finch. He won
a handsome MFer, man.
He won an Oscar for it, and there are some film adaptations. Honestly, To Kill a Mockingbird's film adaptation is not my favorite because I don't feel like they really can get all of the depth of the book.
There's too much. There's too much going on.
But if you're ever going to say someone was cast perfectly, Gregory Peck as Atticus Finch. I cannot picture anybody better. No. That man was it. He was Atticus. So I would say my favorite story, I really, yes, Boo Radley's a great story. I really love, oh my goodness, I just blanked. She's my favorite character. Why would I do this on the episode of my favorite book? Miss Maudie Atkinson.
Okay.
So Miss Maudie, the way she's described in here, she's like, they talk about her being, like, she's got a wide bottom, and she's just an old Southern lady who likes to garden, and she grew up with Atticus, but
don't you say hey to me?
Yeah. She's just she's a great character, and she lives across the street from them, and I like how she is their friend. She's their adult friend.
Right.
And I like how she recognizes when the kids are getting older. She makes cakes for the kids, and she always makes them their own little cake. Mm-hmm. And when Jem, who's Scout's brother, gets older, he gets a slice from the grown-up cake.
Right.
And, like, that's so symbolic that, like, she's recognizing Jem
He's grown now.
A young man. Mm-hmm.
And that means you have to learn to share and be a part of the community now. Mm-hmm. It is a good symbol.
And when the book ends, he's 13, but the book is over a 3-year period. So he's only, I think he's actually officially 9 when the book starts, or he's 10, or on the cusp. But my students, when I taught this book, they were always really thrown off by the kids getting attacked. And I would make them reread the very first line of the book, which is, when he was nearly 13, my brother Jem got his arm badly broken at the elbow. Which is what happens at the end of the book. And I'm like, she told you he was going to get attacked. Like,
he's like,
she didn't say he was attacked, but
she's telling you what's going to happen. And this is and you know what? That is such a kid thing. They're going to tell you a story about how someone broke their arm. But you know what's going to happen? They're going to tell you the whole backstory first.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like...
Yeah. We're going to get 24 stories, and then we're going to find out how Jem broke his arm. I mean, it's all relevant. He broke his arm because of all this stuff that happened.
But that is such a kid thing to say. Like,
the interesting thing is the interesting thing is that she's an adult when she's telling the story, and not a kid anymore. But yes, it's very. But
it's how her child memory is, though, right? Mm-hmm. She has to piece it together based off of these other little things that happen. Right. They're not little things, but little things in her timeline.
That's a great transition to my next question. How do you think the story of Tom Robinson's trial is enhanced or hindered by filtering it through a little girl?
I think it mutes it for the audience.
Is it more relatable in that way?
I think, okay, so I don't know Harper Lee's intention with this book. I don't know if she intended it for children. I don't know if she intended it for adults. I don't know her intended audience.
Mm-hmm.
But as we are teaching this in high school, like you're teaching it to like 9th graders, right?
Yes, I did.
In general, it's like from 10th to 9th grade.
Mm-hmm.
There's still a sense of innocence with those kids.
Yeah.
And filtering what happens, the racism's still very strong, right?
Mm-hmm.
The pain, the struggle, everything he is going through is very strong. But filtering it through a child's point of view mutes it a bit, right?
Yeah.
And I think
softens the blow.
And I think that was her intent. This is racism, but it's racism through a child's eye. And also it's Harper Lee saying, if me at 6 sees this is racism, how can you as an adult not see it? You know?
Right.
It is.
Yeah.
It is definitely Harper Lee going, look.
Right.
Get your shit together.
Right.
You white idiots.
I mean, I agree. YA didn't really exist at this time. So she's writing for adults, but not really because, you know, it's able to be read by high schoolers. I think that filtering it through a little girl does make it feel more accessible. Like, oh, obviously this is a problem because this little girl understands that it's a problem. But
she's pointing it out.
But I also think that the big part of this book is that loss of innocence and that loss of this is when Scout grew up. Right. Like when Tom Robinson is convicted of a rape that he very clearly did not commit.
Didn't do it. He obviously did not do it.
Right. And my favorite thing about teaching this novel, so my students who are not in my advanced class, so my regular students, some of them told me that they had never actually finished a book ever. And so
really
I never assigned them to read it at home. I know I can't imagine that life, but I never assigned it for homework.
Okay.
I stood or sat in front of them and I read to them, which this is not a fun book to read aloud to a class full of
and it's a
mostly
rough book
Black
to read
students.
in general. It's a rough book to read in general.
I mean, there were definitely classes that I was the only white person in there, and it's not a comfortable thing to have to say the N-word, but a short side note, I set it up by talking about how words have meaning and how uncomfortable they can make you feel. And I
how
said,
they hold power.
We're going to read this word. Yeah, we're going to read this word because it's in here, and we're going to talk about why we should not be using that word. But
did you have to send a waiver off? Like
no, it's curriculum for the district and state, so it's not. But I know some schools do, but we did not. But when we got to the part of Tom Robinson's conviction, and that part goes guilty, 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 because the jury is being polled, my students would literally jump up and be like, "What? He didn't do it!" I mean, they were like throwing the book, and they were
I cried
so angry.
I cried when I was a kid when I read that, and I cried as an adult when I read that because it's just so devastating.
It's awful, yeah, and it was such a pivotal moment for me as an educator to be like, okay, so let's talk about this honestly. Why was he convicted if he didn't do it? We know he didn't do it. Why was he convicted? And my students were like, well, that still happens. Like, I mean, and it does. If you look at the statistics, people of color are convicted at a much higher rate than white people, and people of color serve longer sentences for similar crimes.
Yep.
And so this hasn't changed. Like, but that moment coming from Scout's perspective, that moment coming from her perspective, it's the dissolution of her innocence. It's that point in her life. It's that point in her life when she's finally like, oh,
the world's not
this
fair.
Is not good.
The world's not fair. Right. And that is a hard pill to swallow for such a young child.
Right. And I think she probably didn't understand it as well as Jim did. Jim obviously has a much more
visceral
emotional reaction.
Yeah,
he's really angry, and he's trying to figure out how to make it fair. Well, we should put women on the jury. We should put people of color on the jury. And he's trying all these things that would make it. Yeah, right. He's trying all these things to make it more fair, so that Tom Robinson wouldn't have been convicted. But
we have women and people of color on juries now, and it's still happening.
I know. Yes, because even after all these years, we haven't changed the mindset, which is
this book still doesn't make me as uncomfortable as All American Boy, but
yeah, that one we'll
get to that later.
We'll be that in a few weeks, readers. But yeah, that one definitely uncomfortable. All right, so this book is written during the Civil Rights Movement, but it's set during the Great Depression. How would it differ if it was set in the time it was written, or what if it was set today?
I think with the way POCs are treated today, if you're Black, Asian, Samoan, whatever,
Latinx,
right, we are still seeing things like this happen, which is devastating. We are still seeing police brutality. We are still seeing we are seeing gangs of people gang up on POCs, people in the LGBTQ plus community. We are still seeing things like this happen in modern day.
Right.
Will it be from a child's point of view? No. Because
no, it doesn't have to be anymore.
No. Well, the thing is Atticus did a thing where he was always honest with his kids.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I personally am more honest with my children. We watch the news, I explain what's going on, and we go from there.
Mm-hmm.
Not every parent is that way. And I don't think we would get this book, this point of view, and this storyline without that complete timeline.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. I think if it were set today, I don't think a book written today would be told from a white girl's perspective. If we're going to talk about the injustice, we're going to talk about it from the perspective of the person that's experiencing it.
And honestly, that's what we need.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that Harper Lee wrote from, let's not lie, she wrote from her childhood self in this book.
Oh, she did. She
100%.
did. And I'll tell you more about that in a second.
100%. But Piper Addison, Livia Liu, my girls writing about the injustices they're seeing on the TV is not going to be as effective as a classmate of theirs writing about what it's like going to school every day in a jihad. You know what I mean? It's just not going to be as powerful.
Right. Yeah, this is definitely based a lot on her childhood. She set it in a fictional town that is in Alabama that is very similar to her own town she grew up in. The boy Dill, who is her friend, it's based on her actual neighbor and friend Truman Capote.
Really?
Yeah, so they grew up together, and they were friends all through their adult life.
Truman Capote, that's wild.
I know. When To Kill a Mockingbird hit the level of fame that it did, they had a falling out because he couldn't handle that she was more
talking about him.
Yeah. Well, no, it wasn't that. She's more famous than him. He didn't like that. But
the male ego.
Yeah. But they were friends. And so Dill is actually based on him. And Scout is very similar to how she was as a girl.
Understandably.
And her dad was the town attorney. So yeah, she knew what that life was like. After her sister, she has an older sister who's also deceased now. Her older sister went into law also.
Nice.
So but anyway, yeah, this is definitely what it was like for her to grow up in that small town. And when she was writing this, she was writing in New York City.
I couldn't imagine being in New York during the Civil Rights Movement.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
And she had a few friends who believed in her writing, who basically paid for her living expenses for a year that she could actually write this book.
I wonder if she got to see Stonewall. That would have been an amazing book from her point of view too.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But she
just
was
me
kind of a
bubbling.
recluse. Yeah. She was kind of a recluse after this book came out. And I mean, she skyrocketed to popularity and everybody was waiting for the next book and she never published again because she really wasn't one to want fame. Like that was not her thing. She wanted to tell her story and she did. But you know, I love that story.
I love it. It's a good story.
All right. So I'm skipping a couple of questions because we've already talked about it. All right, so class and education, class being
like
social class.
Social class.
Right. And education are a major part of this book. Do you see similar elements in how our society functions today? Have we reached a place where this doesn't matter anymore?
I think money still plays a part in class and education. I don't think there is such a hard line as there used to be because of things like scholarships and whatnot, and the laws we've put in for equality, but money still draws lines. Money still makes, and I think, I'm trying to think of how to say this. I think ignorance when it comes to the undereducated is still very common because, and that's a theme in this book, you know what I mean? The undereducated definitely treated Tom differently than the ones that were educated and knew what was going on. And I mean,
well, it was the only thing that they had above him was that
they were white
and he wasn't.
Right.
Yeah.
And we still see that. There is a subset of grown white males today that still think that they are above POCs because of their skin color.
Yeah.
And I don't think there is much that has changed in that mindset for a good group of it.
Yeah, I mean, I
Sadly.
think that I would say, like, for me, I am an educated woman. I have a master's degree. I married someone that didn't have a college degree at all.
But Tom is educated. He
now has his master's degree, but he didn't then.
I met Tom
2009.
He was working on his bachelor's then, if I remember correctly.
He didn't start until 2012.
Okay. When I met Tom,
but he was already freaking smart.
He is, okay. When I say educated, I don't mean degree. I just finished my bachelor's.
Right.
Last year. But I have always been educated because I take the time to learn, understand what I'm talking about, and move forward. And when I say educated, I mean educated, one, on the issues, educated about the world, educated about life.
Okay. That makes sense.
So
I just think that right now in our country, we have a need for people who are in trades because we've pushed college so hard.
I agree.
And this is coming from an educator. College isn't for everybody. Like, it's just not.
This is something I say. Okay, so Molly Tirate. I don't know how many I had so far. Just let's throw a little tracker. When I have friends that have older kids, that have high school age children, and when I talk to them, I always go, so what's it look like going forward for you? And they're like, college, I guess. And I go, my first thing is you don't have to go to college right away. And their parents instantly gasp, and I go, they can learn a skill set in the military, and they will pay. The military will pay for their education. And they're like, I don't want my kid going to war. I never said I was sending your kid to war. I said there's another option for them that pays for their life, helps them figure out who they are, and eventually they can get schooled.
Well, I think you have a different perspective because you're military. I grew up in a really small town that your options were get out or work at the steel mill.
Mine was be a farmer's wife or a teacher.
And the people that worked at the steel mill, they were quite wealthy. It's a union job. It paid very well. They made way more money than my mom did. And when the steel mill was moved overseas, the town pretty much sank. So my town is really desolate now. And I chose the option of get an education and get out, but I would have chosen that decision even today, but I don't think that is the decision for everybody in that town anymore. Like, I do think people need to learn a trade. And I'm the daughter of 2 tradesmen. My mom is a cosmetologist and my dad is a carpenter, and those are both trades. So, for me, but in this book, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say, I rode the struggle bus till I found, like, my mom signed me up for a trade school and I wasn't ready for school after high school. And
yeah,
I didn't join the military till almost 3 years later, but being forced or doing education is not for everybody. And
no, it's not.
And I will always be an advocate for kids doing something that isn't air quote traditional. Like,
right, yeah. I think you should just do what makes you happy and hopefully you can make money at it. Like, I mean, we're doing this podcast. We're not making any money right now, but we are having
we are.
an amazing time.
Dollars, bitches. No. I'm kidding.
If anybody wants to pay us to do this, that'd be great. But we're just having fun,
yeah, exactly.
But like, I think when it comes to this book and you're talking about, social class and education, like there was a hierarchy here. Like
yes,
I said,
for sure.
The only thing that put the Ewells above the Robinsons was the color of their skin. They had no class whatsoever. They were literally living in the junkyard.
Right, and they were very similar level, and they were very similar levels of education. The Ewells,
Tom Robinson could read. He could read. The Ewells kids couldn't read. Tom Robinson could read. He held a very good, respectable job. His wife also had a respectable job. They were involved in their church. The Ewells literally lived at the junkyard, couldn't read.
So they're hilljacks.
They were getting, government checks,
mm-hmm.
and there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
But he was spending it on alcohol. Like, there was no, like, he wasn't taking care of these kids.
Right.
And there were 7 of them. 7 of them, I think. So
sounds right.
One of the projects I did with my students, which I really loved, was like, I had them create the social ladder for their school.
Oh.
So like, here's the social ladder for To Kill a Mockingbird, and of course, like, the townsfolk and the Finches were like the top of the ladder, and then the bottom of the ladder were the Black community. And so I had them create it for what their school looked like, and it was really interesting to see their perspective of like, this is our social ladder. And I think that's you can still do that today. I mean, right. You really can. And I mean, one of the reasons we picked the neighborhood that we live in Virginia was because Tom and I wanted to be in a blue collar neighborhood. We live in a blue collar neighborhood. Now, are we both educated people? Yes. We both have master's degrees. Do we both? Well, Tom is, a stay-at-home dad now, but I have a job that's not a blue collar job, but it's our comfort level.
Right.
This is the comfort level.
But it's also where you grew up. Right?
Right.
You grew up in a very similar setting to me.
Right.
So being around people that are blue collar are your people. I grew up in a farm town. Bill is a mechanic. My mom ran a truck stop. Now she runs a bank.
Right.
But Matt and I live, I guess you haven't. We live in League City, which
I've been to your house in League City.
Yes, you have. You've been to my new house. It is not a blue-collar area.
Mm-mm. You live in a very wealthy area.
But my husband is a blue-collar man.
Right.
My husband has busted his ass to give us the life we've gotten.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the trade industry that your husband is in. There's a lot of money in that for tradespeople, like for people that are working the thing.
Right. Okay.
So
we're definitely off topic again. Sorry.
I'm sorry. You keep reining me in. Okay. All right. So did you feel like this book had a different impact on you reading it as an adult than as a teenager?
It's when I was a kid, it highlighted something I already knew. but didn't speak about because of where I was. When I was a kid, I definitely felt empowered by this book to speak out because there was a lot of kids back home that used the N-word, and they're grown-ups now and they still use the N-word, which is just gross.
Ignorant. That's what that is.
It's gross. Now, I didn't understand the cultural relevance of it. I did not understand the timepiece that it is and the importance it is to education as a whole. So the book still holds meaning to me. It still was a jumping point for me, as I am an advocate. I will always be an advocate for POCs, people in the alphabet mafia. I will always be someone to speak up for the little guy. Not little guys, but you get my point. Yeah. And this book was definitely my jumping point for that.
Right.
Still get mad when Tom goes to jail, but
yeah, I mean, I feel like it impacted me differently reading it as an adult. I've read it so many times now, and I feel like each time I read it, I still cry at the end every single time I read it. When
why?
Jem is
Can I ask why?
When Jem and Scout are attacked.
Oh yeah, that's very upsetting. Yes, but, I thought you meant like when the book ends.
No. At the end of the book, I always cry at the image of her walking Boo Radley back to his house and realizing that when you actually see someone for who they are, they might not be what you've pictured all along, you know? They talk about Tom Robinson's murdered, basically, in jail while he's trying to escape. And Atticus's quote is, he was just another black man who cut and run to the guards. Like, to them, he was not Tom Robinson with a family who was actually a good guy and innocent. They saw the color of his skin and he was running. So, you know,
that's actually my favorite quote. One of my favorite quotes in there is because Atticus, he holds a lot to the chest, but he was so upset when Tom died.
Oh, he was.
Yeah. He was so upset when Tom died. Well, when he was murdered, when he was killed. And then him speaking at the end, he is such a put together man. He is very methodical, and he was definitely out of sorts when, the kids were attacked and.
Right. And he really thought Jem was at fault. He didn't want to believe that we're not letting Jem off the hook for this. Like, he killed somebody, we're going to, Because
he is a true neutral in the world, you know what I mean? He believes in laws, he knows there's good and bad, and if you do bad, you go to jail, and he is a true man of the law. And...
Well, my favorite quote, since you mentioned yours, my favorite quote is, I wanted you to see what real courage is instead of getting the idea that courage is a man with a gun in his hand. It's when you know you're licked before you begin, but you begin anyway, and you see it through, no matter what.
It's a good quote.
And that's Atticus.
Yeah.
I love it because, I think that's what we do think still.
Yeah.
Courage is that guy that's, standing there. You do not have to carry a gun or have a big stick to be courageous.
It just makes you feel braver. It just makes you feel braver. But put that stick down, you're losing that courage.
But standing up for what is right, even when you know you can't win, it's always the more courageous thing to do. All right, so my last question for you, and this has been a very serious episode.
I know.
I'm afraid that all of these episodes are going to be super serious based on the books I picked, and I'm kind of bummed out by that because I like our witty banter. But but I love this book so much.
I know.
So,
I think it's important to cover for sure.
All right, so we were talking about banned books. Do you think this book should be removed from school's curriculum?
Absolutely fucking not.
That is my favorite answer you've ever given in ever history of any of the podcasts.
Absolutely fucking not. With what happened last year, with George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
With what's still going on with the kids that have died for just wearing hoodies in convenience stores, for the children that walk home late at night and are killed by a neighbor who thinks that they're hoodlums. This book will never not be relevant and not need to be a topic in schools.
Right. I mean, the fact that that young Black men are having conversations with their parents on how you interact with police. That's a problem.
So there's a scene. I'm going to talk about Grace for a second, people. I'm sorry. There is a scene in Grace.
I don't think we ever get through an episode without talking about Grace.
There's a scene in Grace when Miranda is having a conversation with Tuck. It's her and her husband. And I'm tearing up now. And I know these are fictional characters.
I cry over fictional characters all the time.
They are telling him what he has to do. Speak softly and clearly. If you have a hood on, put your hood down. Put your hands up. And they're sitting, and I'm like, and at the time when I watched this, he was 12 and Piper's 12. And I'm sitting there tearing up, and I had to pause it because I'm so emotional. I could not imagine having to teach my child, an innocent child, that a grown adult may think you're up to something nefarious, that will try to kill you because of your skin tone.
Right.
That is such an injustice in this country.
Right. And I mean,
it is such an injustice.
Absolutely. And this book, I mean, it's talking about this happening in the 30s.
How are we not past this?
And I know Tom Robinson wasn't a victim of police brutality. Heck, Tate, who's their sheriff, just arrested him. He didn't rough him up or anything like that.
Right, because
because he's a good guy. He's a good cop.
He's a good cop.
And there are good cops.
Agreed.
But there was very clearly evidence that Tom Robinson was innocent, and then in fact that Bob Ewell was the one that had beaten Mayella. There was no evidence that she had ever been raped, but there was speculation that her dad molested her.
Which not surprising with the Ewell history.
Yeah. But they arrested a man because of the color of his skin. That's what it boils down to.
And it's still happening now.
And then they convicted him because of the color of his skin. And the truth is that until we can eradicate that from this country, books like this need to be taught. They need to be read in our schools because this is the gateway. I know we started talking about critical race theory, but this is the gateway to so many conversations. I cannot tell you how many conversations I got into with my students about why this was so wrong and how this is still happening today. And when I was teaching this book, I was teaching in the middle of the West Tampa projects. Yeah. So I'm teaching mostly Black children
of color,
but a lot of children of color. I was sometimes the only white person in the room. And to be able to have those conversations with them, I really wish everyone got to experience that because there's just such a thoughtfulness to my students. And I'm talking about 14 and 15-year-olds who had told me they had never read a book before. And they found one that they liked and they found one that they related to.
Because it spoke to them and it related to.
Yeah. Now, I do think there are a lot of people that want to have this removed from curriculum because there are books that are set today.
Which is
fine. There are books that are set from the perspective of a person of color experiencing
honestly, if you want to do that, put these hand in hand.
Yes, that is exactly what I was going to say.
Put these hand in hand.
There would be a great comparison.
And there is so many great books. Right. Sorry, not just people of African descent. There are books based off of people from Middle East. There's books about Indians and Samoans. There are so many books of talking about people of color and their struggle in the United States of America.
Right. And I'm all for us updating our curriculums to include a lot of what's taught in high school English classes is the whitewashed male perspective. And I'm all for us updating that.
Yo, problem with it, vote them out.
I'm all for us updating that. I think Harper Lee's a woman, so we at least get a woman's perspective and things. But this particular book,
women tend to be more empathetic. Not me personally, because I am stone-hearted, but women in general are more empathetic.
Are you a Slytherin?
No, I've been called a Slitherpuff. I'm mostly Hufflepuff.
Okay,
Slytherin tendencies.
Side note, because the book I just finished was Harry Potter and what the hell, the Order of the Phoenix. Are you a little bit like what the fuck's the bitch's name?
Which one?
The really evil one in it.
Oh, Dolores Umbridge? I am not Dolores Umbridge. The audacity of you to even accuse me of that.
All the pink and all the kitty plates.
Yes, have you met me? I love
horrible.
kitty plates. Kitty plates.
She's a horrible person. No, honestly, I had a hard time not picturing her as a librarian, like a stereotypical librarian.
Okay, totally off topic. The casting of that is perfect. Moving on. Back to Kill a Mockingbird.
Well, the person that she's married to played Carson on Downton Abbey, and I just figure, like, she can't really be evil in real life because she's married to Carson.
No.
All right, so my point is, circling back, my point is that this book is one that I hope remains in schools. I think it's so relevant. I think it's beautiful.
Agreed.
I 100% think that if you're listening to this and you haven't read it since you were a kid, a teenager,
pick it up again, please
read it again. Definitely the audiobook. Sissy Spacek does an amazing job. I don't recommend like rolling around town with your windows down when she's like yelling, like saying an N-word everywhere, because like it's all over the book. But
wait, if you can listen to DMX with your windows down, you can listen to Sissy Spacek read you Kill Mockingbird.
It is definitely a different experience than DMX.
I agree, but if you're okay with using the N-word when it comes to rap music, which it is their right as POCs, you should be comfortable enough to talk about it in a book.
Yeah. It's a really great book. I highly recommend it. Thank you, Molly, for like doing it, for reading it, because
I think this is like the cornerstone of banned books.
Mm-hmm.
I think it will always be a book that is on the chopping block when it comes to curriculum. And this is not my favorite book. I like this book.
It doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be.
I'll like it for both of us.
That's perfectly fine. But what I will say is I will always fight for this book to be a part of children's education.
Me
always.
Too. Mm-hmm. There was a school 2 years ago that removed it from their curriculum, and their local public library bought extra copies and then prominently displayed them, and they were just flying off the shelves. But teenagers. There were teenagers who were told, you don't have to read this book, and they were like, but I want to. But I want to read that book. As soon as you tell
a kid they're not allowed to do something, what are they going to do?
They're going to do it.
Because they're idiots.
Yeah. So I'll put links in oh my gosh, words. I'll put links in our description that lists
everything
the banned
books
about. List.
Yes.
Yeah. And the IMDb page for the movie. Banned Books Month is actually the month of September, and Banned Books Week is the last week of September going into October this year. But ALA puts together a top 10 banned books list every year, and that's released during Banned Books Week. We are going to, in one of the upcoming episodes, not next week, besties, but the following week, we're going to read Trauma, and we're going to talk about banning books, the process, and what is the most banned right now, like what is getting banned more often these days.
Popular, yeah.
Yeah. And so if you have questions about banned books, please comment. Please follow us on social media and ask me questions, because this is a passion of mine.
She's got all the answers, gang.
It's a passion of mine. Librarianship involves, we have a top 10 Bill of Rights of librarianship, and number 1 is not censoring and providing free and open access to information. And so we fight against this. That is our job.
I actually got in an argument with one of Piper's teachers about her reading a book.
Oh no.
5th grade, little story, besties. 5th grade. Piper's reading Hunger Games for the first time.
A great book. Also a banned book.
Piper is way past that reading level and comprehension by the time I'm letting her read this book.
Right.
She's reading it in the middle of class, and I get not an email, but a phone call from that teacher asking me if I knew what my daughter's reading. Yeah, I do. Why? And she goes, I just feel it's inappropriate for her, and I'd prefer her not to bring it to school.
I feel like you should shut the up.
And I go, ma'am, I appreciate your thought. That book is in the school's library. So it's allowed in the school, and you don't have the right to tell my child what she can and can't read.
They had it in the 5th grade library?
They had it in the school, in the elementary school's library, yeah.
Really? That's surprising. I was an elementary librarian last year. I would not have put it in our library. The reading level for it, you can, like, right. I think it's 8th and up.
But PAR has it broken down by reading levels, and they have a GT section for the gifted and talented and reading comprehension kids.
And even with that, even with our gifted students, it's not one that I would put in the library because it's not about the reading level. It's about the content with that one. Right. But here's the thing. If a kid was reading it at school and one of my Battle of the Books kids was reading it at school, I had a whole conversation with her about it. I was like, let's talk about it. And, like, this amazing series. It's my favorite series.
As a parent that allows I don't censor what they intake. I make sure they comprehend it, and I make sure that they are at an appropriate age level for it. Right? Yeah. And for that woman who is outside of this house, let alone and a public school educator, to tell my child that this book was inappropriate, set my skin on fire.
What bothers me more about that than anything is that as a librarian, if a kid comes to me and asks me for a book, I'm going to give them that book. I don't care if their parent allows them to read it or not. And the reason that I'm going to do that is because there are things that teens need to know, and the internet is not always the right place to get that answer.
Word.
So, for example, in one of my interviews for a librarian position, children's librarian position, I was asked, you know this person's parents, and you know they wouldn't want them they're really religious and they wouldn't want them to read anything LGBTQ, and this child comes and asks you about things, nonfiction about sexual identity. What do you do? And I was like, I get them the book, because I don't care what their parents have to say. Their parents aren't here. This kid could be questioning their sexuality and need some real information about it. And that is not going to come from the internet. You're going to get not reliable sources.
Well, because the internet is full of hate and misinformation.
And I mean, I can't be like President Diaz, or I guess that wasn't her last name. I can't go get the pamphlets from Planned Parenthood, but I can give you a nonfiction book about LGBTQ sexuality, and we have books in the library. I not in my particular library where I am now, but we have books in our library where you can learn the things of how it works, how your pieces and parts go together.
I actually just got a book for Piper about this called Consent. So I will actually put the link to that if you are looking for something that is a great conversation for your kids about the things, I will post the link to the 2 I found that I've been using with Piper.
And that's the point of us doing this banned books month thing. Besides the fact that I love banned books and I really just wanted you to read To Kill a Mockingbird, it's to talk about why books should be accessible and why we shouldn't be doing this.
And censorship never helps.
When you think you're saving somebody from something, all you're doing is drawing attention to it, and then more people want it.
Agreed.
So, all right, so I think we have to wrap up.
We sure do. Besties, thank you.
Because we're over.
Whatever. Besties, we love you. Thank you for joining us.
Yes,
next week is Looking for Alaska. I don't have the book. Do you have the book?
Looking for Alaska by John Green. I don't have it with me right now, but Looking for Alaska by John Green. It is his first novel that he published.
So good.
If you haven't read it, fantastic. Absolutely read it.
definitely cried.
Oh yeah, bring tears. Bring tears. Bring Kleenex. It's John Green. You're going to cry. That's just his way.
It's his motto. It's actually stamped on his money. I'm John Green. You're gonna cry.
I approve these tears. I just want to say thank you so much to our fans. We have a fan base now, Molly.
We do.
We have people who are commenting, who are sharing. We just had a fantastic episode last week with our friend Katie. My gosh.
Honorary Book Bestie.
Yes. We love her. Katie has entered in our group chat now.
We have a group chat with Katie going.
Even though her episode's over, we love her. And
I think she's probably super busy and she's just like, what are these two doing?
I know. She's regretting ever connecting with us. But yeah, so Book Besties, thank you so much for following us, sharing, liking, subscribing, all those wonderful things. And we'll see you next week with Looking for Alaska by John Green.
Yay! Love you guys.
Bye! Thank you for joining us on Book Besties. Don't forget to like and subscribe. The views discussed here are those of Molly and April, not those of anyone else. Today's book was To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Your book besties are Molly Biggs and April Watkins. Editing by Thomas Watkins. And music is Sleep Sweetly by Prejudices. Don't forget to follow the Book Besties on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. If you'd like to contact the Book Besties, please email us at bookbestiespod@gmail.com.